My name is Anna. I am in my mid-30s, and I live with my husband David and our 2 children in Grand Rapids, Michigan. We had our kids a little later than most of our friends, so they are still in elementary school, full of energy and innocence. For years, I believed our marriage was solid, unshakable even. David worked hard, sometimes commuting to Chicago for his job, which often required him to stay in a company-provided apartment during the week. Despite the distance, I trusted him. We had been through so much together, and he had never given me a reason to doubt him. That was true, until about a year ago, when a name began to creep into our conversations more and more often: Sophie. At first, Sophie was nothing more than a casual mention. David told me about her on evenings when we called or when he came home for the weekend. He said she was a new employee at his company, fresh out of school, eager to learn. He described how he mentored her, how she asked endless questions, how she was quick to laugh at his jokes. I didn't think much of it. He was her manager, after all, and he had always been proud of guiding new team members. But gradually, the tone of these stories changed. He didn't just mention Sophie in passing anymore. She became a regular feature in his retellings of his workday. Sophie did this, Sophie said that, Sophie is so funny. I remember once putting down my coffee cup and asking, half teasingly, "Do you ever talk about anyone else at that office?" He laughed it off, saying, "She just makes the days easier, that's all." Then, one evening, David casually referred to her as his work wife. The words made my stomach turn. I knew the concept. People joked about having a work husband or work wife, but I never liked it. To me, it blurred boundaries that shouldn't be blurred, especially in marriage. "Why would you call her that?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. He shrugged. "It's just what people in the office say. We spend a lot of time together, and they tease us. Nothing serious." But it didn't feel like nothing. The following months only deepened my unease. At an office party in Chicago, I tagged along with David, hoping to see this dynamic for myself. Sophie was there, standing close to him, laughing too loudly at his jokes. When I introduced myself, she gave me a quick, polite smile and turned her attention back to David, as if I weren't even there. That stung. Later that evening, a couple of David's female coworkers approached me quietly. "You know, they call each other work husband and work wife," one of them said. Another leaned in and whispered, "He even answers the phone to her with 'Hey, beautiful.'" I froze. My husband, my David, calling another woman beautiful? When we got home to Grand Rapids, I confronted him. "Why are your coworkers telling me you call Sophie things like sweetie and beautiful?" I demanded. David looked shocked, then defensive. "I don't know why they'd say that. Maybe they misheard. You're overreacting." "Overreacting?" My voice cracked. "You've never even called me beautiful at work, and now I hear you say it to her in front of everyone." He shook his head. "Anna, I'm just friendly with people. That's it. You need to stop being jealous." That night, I couldn't bear to sleep next to him. He stayed in the guest room, while I cried silently in our bed. The next morning, after dropping the kids off at school, David sat me down at the kitchen table. He looked tired, remorseful. "Listen," he said. "When Sophie started, she didn't know much about the job. She shadowed me a lot. The guys started teasing me, calling her my work wife. That's all it was. I didn't think it mattered." "It matters to me," I said, my eyes burning. "Would you like it if I had a work husband and hid it from you?" David stared at the floor, unable to answer. Finally, he whispered, "I'm sorry. I didn't realize how it looked. I'll set boundaries." I wanted to believe him. I really did. We began marriage counseling, trying to rebuild trust. David promised to distance himself from Sophie, and for a while, I saw changes. Some of his female coworkers, women I had added on Facebook, told me he'd asked Sophie to go to someone else for small questions instead of always running to him. That gave me hope. But that hope shattered one stormy night, when Sophie arrived on our doorstep. The night Sophie showed up at our house, the rain was pounding hard against the windows. I had been setting the table for our weekly date night with David. The kids were at my parents' place in Lansing, and I had been looking forward to an evening just for us. Quiet, private, something we desperately needed after months of tension. When the doorbell rang, my heart jumped with excitement. Finally, he was home. I hurried to open it, already smiling. But the smile froze on my face. David was standing there, drenched from the storm, and beside him stood Sophie. Her hair clung to her face, her blouse plastered against her skin. She looked too comfortable next to him. Her car broke down, David explained quickly, sensing my shock. She called me for help on my way home. With the weather this bad, I couldn't leave her there. I bit my lip, forcing myself to swallow the anger rising in my chest. I didn't want to explode in front of her. So instead, I stepped aside and let them in. David disappeared upstairs to change into dry clothes, leaving me alone with her. I handed Sophie a towel, which she accepted without even thanking me. Her eyes wandered around the house, lingering on the family photos along the staircase. I asked, curtly, "Would you like some dinner?" She nodded, though her tone was flat, as if she were granting me permission. I swallowed my irritation and returned to the kitchen, chopping vegetables, clattering pans louder than necessary. Moments later, David came back down in fresh clothes. Sophie looked at him instantly, ignoring me, and said, "Can I use your bathroom too?" "We have a guest bathroom," I interjected quickly. But Sophie tilted her head toward David, pretending not to hear me. "Can I use the master? I'd feel more comfortable." David hesitated, then nodded. "Sure, upstairs." My jaw tightened. She walked up the stairs without even glancing at me, as if this were her house. When she was out of earshot, I leaned toward David, hissing in a whisper, "What the hell are you doing, letting her into our bedroom?" He held up his hands. "It's just a bathroom, Anna. Don't make a scene. Don't make a scene," I repeated, my voice trembling with anger. "You ruined our date night for her, and now she's in our space. Do you even realize what that looks like?" "She was stranded in the rain," he said. "I thought you, of all people, would understand." I shook my head, my chest heaving. Before I could answer, Sophie's voice floated down from upstairs. "David, could you bring me another towel?" The rage inside me snapped. "No," I snapped back loudly. "If she needs something in my house, she asks me." I stormed upstairs and found Sophie peeking out of the bathroom door, water dripping down her hair. She gave me a sheepish smile. "Sorry, I didn't want to bother you." I thought David could. "Anything you need, you ask me," I cut her off, shoving a fresh towel into her hands. "Not my husband." Her smile faltered, but she took the towel silently. By the time I returned downstairs, David had set the table. I sat down, forcing a tight smile. Sophie joined us, her hair still damp, and without a word, slid into the seat beside David instead of across the table. I clenched my fork so tightly my knuckles whitened. Dinner began awkwardly. I had thrown together a quick pasta, nothing fancy, since I had originally planned for us to eat out. Sophie twirled a forkful, sniffed, and let out a laugh. "Pasta? That's it." She glanced at David with a smirk. "I thought you'd get something better at home." My blood boiled. "This is what I chose to make tonight," I said evenly. She tilted her head, feigning innocence. "Is this what you serve him every night after work?" "That," I replied sharply, "is none of your business." Sophie chuckled and turned to David. "You deserve more than this." The room went silent. I slammed my fork down. "Who do you think you are, speaking to me like that in my own house?" Sophie straightened her shoulders. "I think I'm someone who cares about him. Honestly, Anna, you act like a bad wife. Maybe even a bad mother. You sit around all day while he works his heart out, and you can't even make him a proper meal." The words hit me like knives. I could barely breathe. My husband finally spoke, his voice sharp. "Sophie, that's enough. You're crossing a line." But Sophie ignored him. Her eyes locked on mine, her tone venomous. "He deserves better than you. Everyone can see it." I stood up slowly, my entire body shaking. I wanted to slap her, scream, throw her out. But instead, I leaned in close, lowering my voice so every syllable cut deep. "If you were such a good wife," I whispered, "you wouldn't have 3 failed marriages behind you. Everyone knows you chase older men. You're nothing more than a gold digger." Sophie's face drained of color. She gasped, tears welling in her eyes. "How dare you bring that up?" she shouted, her voice breaking. But I didn't flinch. "Get out of my house." She looked at David, expecting him to defend her. But he sat frozen, shaken, speechless. So I marched to the door, flung it open, and pointed outside. "Out!" The storm raged as Sophie stumbled onto the porch, tears mixing with rain. She screamed insults, pounding on the door, but I locked it and pressed the intercom button. "If you don't leave, I'll call the police." For several minutes, she kept shouting, then finally disappeared into the storm, probably finding a cab or calling Mark, her boyfriend. When the house finally went quiet, I collapsed into a chair, shaking. David stood across from me, his face pale. "That was cruel," he said softly. "Kicking her out in the rain like that." I stared at him, my heart breaking all over again. "Cruel? She insulted me in my own home, and you didn't stop her. Do you know what cruelty is, David? It's watching your husband let another woman disrespect you under his roof." The silence between us was louder than the thunder outside. The next day, I couldn't stop replaying Sophie's words in my head. Bad wife. Bad mother. They echoed, clawing at my confidence. Even though I had defended myself, even though I had thrown her out, I felt shaken. David tried to apologize, but the damage was done. Something had shifted inside me. That weekend, I asked to see his phone. "If there's nothing between you and Sophie, then prove it," I said. He hesitated. "Why? Don't you trust me?" "Not anymore," I replied. After an argument, he finally handed it over. I scrolled through hundreds of messages. His replies were short, formal, but hers were dripping with flirtation. "You always make me laugh. You're the only one who understands me. Do you think I look good in this?" And then, months earlier, a photo. Revealing, inappropriate. Sophie posing in a tight dress, sending it to my husband. David's reply made my stomach churn. "You're beautiful. But don't send me things like this again." Beautiful. He had never called me that in a message. I threw the phone down on the couch, tears burning my eyes. "You knew," I whispered. "All this time, you knew she had feelings for you. And you let me think I was just jealous." "Anna," David pleaded, dropping to his knees. "I didn't want to hurt you. I never encouraged her. I swear." But the trust was gone. I couldn't sleep for nights after reading those messages. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that photo Sophie had sent, saw David's response, "You're beautiful." My husband, the man who had always avoided flowery words with me, had given them to her. Finally, I realized I couldn't keep living in this fog. I needed answers, not from David. He had already twisted things, minimized, deflected, but from someone else. Sophie's boyfriend, Mark. I found him on Facebook after some searching. He worked at a logistics company in Chicago. His profile showed a normal man, office selfies, weekend hikes, photos with Sophie where she always smiled too brightly, as if forcing the world to believe in their happiness. My hands shook as I typed the message. "Hi, you don't know me, but I think we should talk about Sophie." His reply came hours later. "Who is this?" "I'm Anna. My husband works with Sophie. This is about something important. Please don't mention this to her." After a long pause, he agreed. "We can meet near my office. Public place. Lunch hour." 2 days later, I drove to Chicago, parked near Millennium Park, and sat trembling on a bench under the shade of the giant silver bean. When Mark arrived, he looked confused, wary. "Okay," he said cautiously, "what's this about?" I handed him my phone, already open to the messages between Sophie and David. He scrolled, his eyes widening at the photo, his jaw tightening with every line. "She never told me about your husband," he muttered, shaking his head. "Not once." I swallowed hard. "She calls him her work husband. At office parties, she makes sure everyone knows. And she insulted me, in my own house." Mark closed his eyes, pressing his fists to his forehead. "This explains everything. She's been distant for months. I thought it was me. Thought I wasn't giving her enough attention. It's not you, I said softly. It's her. For a moment, we just sat in silence, two strangers united by betrayal. Then Mark looked at me, his face pale but resolute. Thank you for telling me. I needed to know. When I left the park, I felt a strange mix of relief and grief. Relief that I wasn't crazy, that someone else saw what I saw. Grief because my marriage, the life I had built with David, felt like a crumbling house, its foundations rotten. That night, I barely spoke to David. He tried to pull me close, but I rolled away, tears soaking into my pillow. The final blow came the following weekend. Mark texted me. We need to talk. I have proof. We met again, this time at a quiet cafe off Michigan Avenue. He slid his phone across the table. On the screen were screenshots of Sophie's Snapchat messages. My breath caught in my throat. It was worse than I feared. Sophie, I can't stop thinking about that night. David, we shouldn't have done it. I love my family. Sophie, then why didn't you stop me? David, please, don't tell anyone. It was a mistake. Please keep it between us. I stared at the screen until the letters blurred. A one-night stand. The thing I had feared all along. Mark's voice was low, bitter. She admitted it to me last night. Said it only happened once, late at the office. She wanted to keep it going, but he told her no. That's why she's been lashing out at you, because he rejected her afterward. I ran from the cafe, nausea rising, and barely made it to the sidewalk before I vomited. It was real. Not just flirting, not just crossed boundaries. They had crossed the line. When I got home to Grand Rapids, I packed a bag for myself and the kids. I drove straight to my parents' house. My mother opened the door, took one look at my face, and pulled me into her arms. My father's jaw tightened like steel when I told him everything. You're not going back there, he said firmly. Not after this. We'll help you, Anna. The next morning, I called a lawyer. My hands shook as I explained my situation, but my voice grew steadier with each word. I needed custody arrangements. I needed to protect my children. I needed to end this marriage. When David called, his voice was frantic. Anna, please. Don't leave me. Think about the kids. It was one mistake, one night. I regret it every second. But I was done. You regret getting caught, I said coldly. Not the betrayal. He begged. He cried. But I didn't waver. That weekend, I watched my children playing in my parents' backyard, their laughter cutting through the heavy cloud of sorrow. And I realized, I would survive this. I would build a new life, one free of lies, one where I could hold my head high. David had destroyed our marriage, but he would not destroy me. I would walk away, papers in hand, and never look back.